Assalamu alaikum. Come on, guys. I know Sunday afternoon, everybody is heavy on lunch, and but थोड़ी सी energy दिखाएं. Assalamu alaikum. Better. So, my name is Sana Shah, and I'm here from Karachi. A little introduction on myself. I'm into the IT industry for the last 15 years. And currently, I'm working as the Director Academy, which is called Ashtratech, which is in partnership with the National Aerospace Science and Technology Park in Karachi, and now also in Lahore, and inshallah soon in Islamabad also. So this is my first time attending WOW Festival, and I'm really, really excited to be here. Amne is a good friend. She invited me, and I just grabbed onto the opportunity. And so far, so good. It's been amazing. I met with my panelists also over here. And so let's just start. So we have our introduction already हो गया था हमारे panelists का, but I have Varda Khan, who is a product manager by profession, and she's currently working at Seven Walls on product related to asset management. Then we have Faiza. Faiza is a seasoned technology professional with 12 years of experience in the field and with academia credentials from university in US, and has a bachelor's degree in engineering and master's in computer science as well. And currently she's the head of digital products and solutions at Jazz. Wow. And then we have Gulale Khan, who is a policy, communication, governance, and gender practitioner and teaches internet governance and technology policy at LUMS. Is that correct, girls? I'm sorry अगर मैंने इतने आपके amazing profiles थे अगर उसमें से कुछ miss out कर दिया हो. So, closing the digital divide, I think a topic which has been discussed umpteen times again and again, and बहुत sessions हुए हैं पाकिस्तान में. So this topic today is we are going to discuss and explore the barriers, the solutions, and the insights that women in technology use and how they perceive. So to start with, Varda. वर्दा अगर आप इधर आ जाते एंड फाइजा उधर चली जाती, आई एम सो सॉरी. So Varda, you've been the ambassador of women in games for the Asian region. So how do you see the strategies that have been the most effective in encouraging women participation in games and computing in Asia?
Am I audible? Yes. So when I joined Women in Games back in 2020, there were not a lot of people, not a lot of women in games working in Pakistan. So it was a very difficult area to navigate. One, because games in general is a very male-dominated field. And then two, you don't find a lot of resources to help you if you want to have a career in games. So I found out about Women in Games, I applied, I was chosen as an ambassador. And there you get to realize that women across the world are facing the same problem. So it doesn't matter if you're in the US or if you're in Pakistan, women are facing the same problems. So whatever policies had they adopted to help themselves, they were automatically translatable here as well. One of the good things that I liked about the gaming industry in Pakistan was that the gaming studios in general were very eager to adopt those. So if, for example, I was working for a gaming studio and they hired an intern and she did not have access to play games. And you know, when you're working in a specific industry, you need to have knowledge of that particular industry. So if you're not playing games, if you don't have access to games, how are you going to translate that onto your work? So they provided with the equipment that was required for that particular intern to get access to the information that she needed. Apart from that, a lot of game jams started happening. So there's one particular individual, Summer. She runs a company out of Islamabad, Epiphany, and she took up the lead to organize game jams where the main focus was to get women onboarded and have the same opportunity as the boys or men in the industry. So over the years, I've seen my friends who had no idea what Call of Duty was playing games and then telling me about, oh, you know, this is what we did, this is what we're playing, this is how we're doing it. So over the years, the notion that gaming is only for boys or only for men kind of changed. And even now, although it exists, but it has reduced. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy. What matters is how you're playing a game or whether you're playing a game. So that shock that, oh, acha, you're a girl and you play games, that has reduced significantly. So these has helped a lot. So there's university seminars that are happening. You're in direct contacts with teachers and how they're forming their curriculums to help students to know, okay, apart from, you know, traditional coding, game development, how can you get into it? So there's UX, there's game design. And on top of that, there's also more readily available material there. So all of that had been possible since, you know, there was a platform available and they had everything already, you know, figured out for them. And it was easier for us to implement all of that because the infrastructure over here, they were ready to adopt it. Because maybe because they want more people to come into the gaming industry because it's a relatively new field compared to, you know, other software houses that are out there. So that has helped a lot. So I think in the next, let's say 5 years, that ratio is going to, you know, become more equal a lot more sooner than, you know, maybe 5 years.
Right. So coming to Faiza. Faiza, since you have an experience in digital analytics. Sorry? No. हाँ, chair चाहिए. वो ले लो, remove कर दो. Sorry. And you're leading digital products and solutions at Jazz. And I know this for sure that when, even in the past, I've dealt with programs where we have this discussion over women's, presence on the digital platforms and all. And I think someone like you, me, and a few others in this room, I think ये ratio बहुत छोटा है. It's, I think, less than 5%, if I'm not wrong. So how do you ensure that women have equal access to these digital solutions and platforms?
Thank you, Sana. So, Sana, I would like to elaborate a little bit on some of the impediments that there are in Pakistan in particular, in terms of why there is such a digital gap in between women and men in Pakistan. I think one of the foremost reasons is also the affordability and accessibility of devices. We see that in low-income households, the focus is generally on if they have to choose between a male or female in the family, it's generally the men who get access to smartphone devices. There could be multiple reasons, cultural barriers. Like I said, they are low-income households, so they focus on spending more where they feel like they see a general output there. The Ministry of IT has recently finalized a plan for smartphone financing policy. I believe that initiatives like that really need to be implemented so that it becomes more accessible and affordable for women as well. And in addition to affordability, we see that a lot of people don't even have the awareness that how can they use a digital device, a smartphone or any other device to sort of generate income. And I'm from a technical background, but I've seen so many women that are homemakers, but they're running businesses out of their home, and they're able to create an ecosystem whereby they can work from the vicinity of their home and yet provide for themselves and their families. So I feel like it's really important to create that awareness as well, for which we'll need community tech centers, digital literacy hubs maybe, where they're not just using these devices for entertainment or connectivity purposes, but they're also using it for a bigger purpose, which I feel like is financial stability here. Because when we talk about digital divide, that also ends up resulting in a financial divide, and digital inclusion reciprocates into financial inclusion as well. So these are some of the areas that we really need to work on. And another thing that I need to highlight is that creating safe digital spaces would also be really helpful, because we see that families are often reluctant about their women taking up digital platforms, or even using the device in general, because they associate it with something negative and not anything positive, that okay, they can maybe see the opportunities that it can provide. So I feel like awareness programs, not just for women but their families as well, to realize and see the opportunities that they can have if by utilizing these digital platforms, they could eventually achieve financial stability.
So, Gulalai, I think in continuation of from what Faiza just said, since you have an experience on the policy and governance side, and she mentioned that how the ministry is now taking initiatives and working around policies. So according to you, which are the policies that should be prioritized specifically to close this digital divide and ensures that women have access to these digital tools and they have some sort of financial inclusion as well?
Okay, thank you, Sana. I think I'll start from the topic that we have, closing the digital divide, and I'll just add a line to it. Where have we failed? So this is a conversation for the last 10 years that I'm at panels, I see it internationally, and policy is one area where we have badly failed. We can have one-off solutions, one government comes in, put up a grand show, and it's mostly, interventions and initiatives that are just not followed through. So I believe that there is a policy consistency that is missing for not just economy and everything, but also for closing the gender digital divide. On what Faiza said, I just want to add up to that of course we know that the affordability is an issue, the ownership is the issue, and family permission is also a very big issue. So even if you have enabling policies, you will have to work very hard on the social norms, So, sometimes it's really upsetting for me to see when I talk to, people and we're working on different policies, when you say that there is a digital divide that exists in Pakistan, and it's a very common, by the way, comment which comes from the highest circles is, but there is no digital divide. My driver uses WhatsApp. My maid has a phone. And these TikTokers, is there a digital divide? And this is like something that I really want to put forth here, is that what you see is not even 1% of the population. You need to look at the whole of Pakistan. It is not just our urban centers or a few big good stories in rural areas. It is actually an entire country that you're looking at when you're developing policy. So that is something that we really need to look at. Number two, as I said, that policy consistency is missing. It is also a critical understanding of what digital divide is, that is also missing in our policy circles. So most of the digital policies or digital strategies that you see, now thankfully we just had a women gender strategy, digital strategy, which the PTA launched last week. And I hope and really want that to be successful in what the milestones they have given. But what we have seen is that when they talk about digital, they mostly talk about IT exports. And then you have a dilemma that you talk about IT exports and you shut down the internet for days, right? And the shutdown is not impacting, of course it's impacting these big businesses, but the small businesses, the micro businesses, the women entrepreneurs at home using internet for their use. Do you know, for weeks they cannot deliver the products that they have ordered. They lose out on a lot of customers. So there's so many things that you need to understand when it comes to digital divide in Pakistan, and also the policy interventions. And believe me, stop comparing yourselves with other countries, because because the kind of suffocation people feel online, and especially women feel online, is another area that if we start talking about it, there is a level which your projects can or the government's projects can support, like accessibility, giving even data to women. But how do you protect them on online spaces? The kind of trolling we face, the kind of harassment women face, that's something that need, and a lot of women go to complain to the FIA, and they're not really happy with the response that they get. So these are the three levels of the digital divide that we need to, address. And Sana, one more thing. I mean, all of us are sitting here talking about, we all have had our mobile phones, and a lot of people in the audience with data. But even with this privileged set, we would see women not being themselves on online spaces. They're scared. That's the third level of digital divide in Pakistan. There is a term, digital parda, that is actually coined for Pakistani online spaces, because women would like to keep themselves safe on online spaces and not being their entire self. So they lose out on a big opportunity that way. And I feel that if a comprehensive policy exercise has to happen, it has to be very consistent, and also in a coordinative effort between all ministries. You can't have one strategy by the IT and then another one by a provincial government and then another a prime minister's scheme. You'll have to have a coordinated approach if you want to close the digital divide. Thank you.
I think very rightly said that.
Adding one more point to what Gulalai said. So we have a very victim blaming mindset overall in our country. So instead of identifying the problem, it's very easy for us to blame the victim. It's always, maybe it was what she was wearing or where she was. When you put yourself online, it becomes more easier for the other person to victim blame. And that has been a huge factor in women wanting to be in online spaces, because we have failed to do that in reality. How can we ensure that in an online platform as well? So I believe that when we're moving forward, I agree there's FIA, but they haven't been very successful in curbing that or in stopping that. So when you talk about being in an online presence or being online, it means that you have to accept the fact that you are somewhat people's property, and it gives them the right to say whatever comes to their mind while having that screen as a protection. And that mindset is kind of demeaning, and it's kind of harming the whole idea that for example, the concept of remote work has allowed a lot of women to work. I was recently talking to somebody in a previous panel.
Sorry. I'll just ask my next question, because that is related to the impact of mentorship, right? And since you've already worked with the UEFN's Creators Program, so how do you see that mentoring is shaping up this inclusion of women digitally and financially? And if there is any impact, because since we all talk about male-dominant society and how it goes.
So UEFN, the Creators Program, was an amazing program because it was 100 women developers, and not just developers, artists from across Asia and Middle East, who were coming together to create smaller projects. One of the most interesting part about that was that there was this one creator. She was from Afghanistan. She did not have access to internet. So the UEFN team, they provided her with internet access, and they made sure that she had that safe space available, and she did not get in any problems because of that. And she was so happy to share her stories through what she created. So it became somewhat of a safe space. And through that, I initially started that women across the world are facing same problems at the core. And when you solve that in one place, it's very easy to translate that onto another place as well. And that program sort of solidified that fact that everybody was there to help one another. And the problems that they were facing, it was somewhat similar. And for example, I'm sitting in Pakistan. And I saw a lot of young girls who were part of that program that I would not have had access to, or of knowing that there are young girls who are starting their university or they're about to graduate from their university who are interested in the gaming industry. And part of the reason was that they weren't able to leave their smaller towns to come to bigger hubs to pursue that. Primarily, maybe because of the financial reasons, primarily because of the societal pressures, but they weren't able to. And this program helped them achieve that by sitting in the comfort of their homes without having to leave their houses and do that. But on top of that, like Gulal, I mentioned that all of these policies, all of these impacts depend on the access of internet and the free access of internet. Now, if somebody does not have internet, that means they're cut off from the world. The whole global village that we're trying to create through the power of internet, that means you're cut out of that. And then these girls, when they have access to internet, then they need to have certain protection there as well. Maybe that is also needed for their parents to be okay with that as well. That okay, this is something that is not going to give them the wrong ideas or put them in a negative space. So that kind of gave an idea that giving internet access to areas other than smaller towns connected to Lahore or Islamabad or Karachi or Faisalabad, but smaller cities, allows more girls to show that they're just as talented as men. They just don't have the access to do that. So again, it's very easy to say, okay, give them internet.
Yeah.
But the implications that come along with it, that is what needs to be resolved.
I think that leads to my next question to Faiza, which is on the educational pathway and the right kind of education for especially for young girls. So since I think we were talking backstage and you mentioned that you are from Sawabi, Peshawar, and we all know that it is maybe not, correct me if I'm wrong, as modern as the cities like Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. And then, of course, you have an educational background where you went to the US that led you to choose a career in technology. And now, mashallah, so you are in a leadership position. So what is one piece of advice for young girls on the educational pathway, adding on to what Varda just said?
So Sana, what I've learned throughout my career is that I have always had a passion for technology, but I believe that over time I've seen how technology impacts the lives of people and how it impacts communities or even economic ecosystems. My advice would be not to just focus on the IT sector, but whatever career path women or young girls decide to choose, they should think of technology as an equalizer, as an enabler. Once they adapt to that with the changing times, I think that's going to put them at the forefront of their careers in whichever career path they choose. So I won't limit it to just the IT sector, but any career path I feel like now requires a certain digital skill set. In our organization as well, we see that they're not limiting trainings to just a certain department, but even our legal sector, our finance, our HR, every department, they make sure is equipped with a digital skill set, because that is the need of the hour right now. So whatever decision you decide to make, regardless of their career path, we need to see technology as an equalizer, and that would be my message to all the young girls out there.
So I've been asked to look at the audience instead of looking at my panelists.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think this is going in a very right direction that the answer ends to the next question, which is the digital skills and the security training. So Gulalai, since you've been working again on the governance and policy level, so what do you think are the right skill sets, especially on the digital end, and then of course security trainings required for these women?
So basically, there are two ways and there are two levels of it. One is a very high profile, cyber security and all these were women in technology who have to protect their business, who have to run, women who code, they understand the language. That's one area. But then there is another sector that I primarily work with is women who either just have a mobile phone by chance or they're just using it for purely entertainment, watching these reels and all these videos and not doing anything productive to do better in their lives. So when I started working with, and this is across the length and breadth of Pakistan, but mostly in the very underprivileged areas, I realized that yes, owning that mobile phone was the first step for them, and most of them have left it because of some issues with their passwords being hacked, or and as a simple thing like a password, understanding an easy understanding the reason why you should have a difficult password is something you need to tell them. So they say, oh, so 1 2 3 4 5 is fine, or 000, because we have to remember it also, or my son's name. And a very incident that I remember is that there was this girl who was working in a textile factory, and she used Facebook for, she was selling some of her designed clothes. She would do that in her off time on Facebook. And there was this guy in a mohalla who just, because she had such an easy password, that he hacked it, and she had to close down not just her account but also her business, a very small level business. So digital skills and security is at one level a very high profile, the kind of skills that you need to compete in an international market for Pakistanis, for data scientists, for students of engineering, students of sciences, but also for citizens at the grassroots who need to be empowered enough with digital skills to use them effectively. So what you do is you just do a random survey, and everybody would say, yes, we use internet. What do you use it for? I have a Facebook account, I have an Insta account, I have a TikTok account. I have nothing against social media platforms. I hope they don't get banned after yesterday. But I have nothing against them. I think that they're really good. But use them productively. Ask them, can you do research? For example, can you do a simple Google search? And they would say no. Then you tell them, can you visit a website and look at the different menu and go to a point of your interest? And they say no. So, that is at the very basic level a skill how to navigate the internet for your own productivity. And once you start telling them that, if you start to look at different websites, you might land up a good job. And that's where the interests come in. So the economic angle of internet usage and accessibility and digital skills can never be undermined. That is one of the biggest factors why people would be interested. I talked about the digital security as well. But I also want to really, really talk about one more thing. When with my experience of working with across Pakistan, a lot of women with these backgrounds, that we talk about technology as one of the biggest enabler and equalizers. But if we don't equip our people with the right kind of skill set and secure environments online, it can be one of the biggest dividers also. And all the development divides that you see offline, they are much more starker online. So we have to be a policy intervention across the board for everyone. I see a lot of private sector entities doing their bit, but there is a limit to what they can do apart from support if they're not supported or that is not supported by the government. So this is something that I really, and I do this as a passion, because I see the transformation after 5 sessions. I see the transformation, the confidence that people have of using it. They also understand, and somebody talked about unsafe online spaces. So when you do it with men, even though it's not a gender, but when you do it with men, most of them said, अच्छा ये बात नहीं करनी चाहिए थी, मुझे लगा ऐसे ही है, गप है. And then you tell them that, this gap is going to be problematic. And suddenly that person face changes because they realize that, yes, we should not be doing it. You teach them about digital footprint and they start becoming careful because they don't want a record of what they have all done. So this is the kind of work that everybody should be doing at the individual level as well as the collective level. And I do see hope in the near future because technology is here to stay. It's not going away anywhere. So let's make the best use of it.
So I think let's just now hop on to the more generic questions which all three of you can address to. So let's start with the challenges and opportunities in technology and the digital space, not just in Pakistan, but in the broader region of Asia. So anyone can start.
Sana, I think we've all raised really good points in terms of the hindrances or challenges, but the opportunity, particularly, I recall the times of COVID, that some of the lessons we learned was in the corporate sector, organizations that departments that were never allowed work from home. People got used to the idea of remote work. They realized that you can achieve the same amount of work, the productivity, whether you're in or not in office. Remote work for women, particularly those who are looking to achieve a work-life balance, has been, I think, one of the biggest opportunities. It's not limiting to a certain sector, whether they're in medical field, whether they are just content creators or content writers or belonging to the IT industry. Being able to work remotely, even for myself, I am a mother of 3 kids, and I had to take a break in between, about a year and a half, and that's what I did. I was working remotely. I was taking up projects, but I had the ability to do that because of the availability of these digital platforms and one thing that we can say, thanks to COVID, that organizations were allowing that as well and letting us do that. So I think these are some of the opportunities that were created, and organizations are open to it. You all might have heard of PayPal payments being allowed for freelancers now. A wonderful opportunity, because now they can even take work from outside of Pakistan and deliver on that. So different avenues are opening up. Now is the time, and I think it's high time that we start owning up into taking up these opportunities. And Gulale mentioned that not everybody has that skill set. In addition to providing women with the digital skill set, there also has to be that drive to take up these opportunities and not procrastinate further.
Adding more to that, I think it has also opened up an opportunity that you don't have to have a 4-year degree from a university in order for you to start working in the IT sector, or start working for that matter. Now the of certification, online short courses have allowed a lot of people who were able to afford a 4-year education, going to a university for whatever matter, are able to make a living out of themselves, and that has been possible. I think that trend became more of took up more momentum during COVID, when a lot of people were stuck inside and all they had to do was do courses and see how they could spend their time. But this has, and even for students who are doing their bachelor's or master's, the idea that they need to have extra skills has allowed a lot of people to start working from the comfort of their homes, start working early, start seeing what works for them, apart from the whole traditional roles that you could be a lawyer, you can be an engineer, you can be a doctor, and if you are not doing any of this, you would not be a successful person. That notion is starting to, fade away, and that is fading away because of the presence of technology and the opportunities that it has been allowing people to have. So, yes.
So, Gulale, I've been asked to wrap this up. So, I'm just going to throw my next and last question. You can continue with the answer and then just add on to the last question as well. So, the last question has to be about the future trends and future trends that leads to women empowerment, and then any piece of advice that you would like to give to the young professionals.
Talking about future, I teach internet governance and technology policy. And I I'm very hopeful that I have a lot of computer science students also coming in a very non-technical course, by the way. And when at the end of the day they come to me of the semester, they say, we've never thought about the products that we develop or computer science and technology in this way. We've never thought about the data protection, the digital colonialism, all these issues that they go side by side to it. So I see future very bright because for the last 5 years, I've seen some of my students go into technology policy. So there was a point in Pakistan, and I'll be very honest about it, where there was a very, very strong elite capture of technology policy discussions. We just had 1 or 2 faces and they'll just, everywhere. I see a lot of women like Faiza and I see a lot of women like Varda and also, my students coming into this space, which is future is something very positive. I'm very happy about it. The future is AI. If you talk about it, and with AI comes the fear of losing jobs. So the challenge then becomes that when you skill people with the digital skills, you have to skill them for the AI world as well. And AI is very exciting. It's something that it's going to come. So even if you're scared of it, so probably I see something like that. And I also see AI dismantling a lot of those old guard and old school things and bringing it a bright new future. And I hope that when it brings a bright new future for the world, it also brings it for Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ji, Faiza.
Yes, and I'll just elaborate a little on Gulale's point of AI. We need to think of AI as not just artificial intelligence, but with the fear of losing jobs, but it's more like augmented intelligence, because that's what it's essentially doing. It's upskilling your own existing digital skill set, or any other skill for that matter. So that's why we need to embrace this technology, the innovation in this field, and make use of it to improve the field that you're working in. So think of it as just augmented intelligence. It's just a statistical approach, is what it is.
We were mentioning technology. Is it on? Yeah. Technology being an enabler.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence is the next step of being that enabler. So instead of fearing it, we need to understand it, because it's very easy to listen to 1 or 2 people talking about how they're going to lose jobs because of AI. But that was the same fear when automobiles came into existence or when computers came into existence. But that did not stop them from creating more jobs as well. That just means that you need to take artificial intelligence, see how that fits into your role, how that would help you become level up in your career, and see how you would go forward with it instead of fearing that, okay, I'm going to lose my job.
I think very rightly said. And I think that with that, we end the panel discussion. Any closing remarks, and then we can conclude this? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.